The cardboard box cut into Jade Monroe's forearms before she had cleared the first block, and the rain had already decided it was staying for the night. Not a dramatic storm, no thunder, no wind, nothing that gave you the courtesy of announcing itself. Just the kind of cold, consistent rain that worked its way into shirt collars and soaked through cotton shoulders and seemed, in the specific logic of bad evenings, to have selected her personally out of everyone still on the street. She kept walking. 8 years at Meridian General had given her a tolerance for discomfort that other people occasionally called unreasonable, and a working ability, after long practice, to separate the pain that demanded attention from the pain that simply wanted it. Tonight's rain was the second kind. The termination letter folded in her scrub's pocket was the first. She had been fired for refusing to sign falsified discharge paperwork. That was the complete shape of it. A patient admitted under circumstances that made the billing department uncomfortable, and the solution Dr. Harkin had landed on was to clear the room 12 hours ahead of schedule by adjusting the timestamps and the documented clinical readiness. All it required was a signature from nursing. He had chosen Jade's because her name was first on the shift board, the kind of thing that happened when you were reliable, and reliability apparently had a cost nobody had put in writing. She had read what he placed in front of her, which was apparently not what you were supposed to do, and when she said no, she had said it with a completeness that left no room for follow-up conversation. She had gone back to her shift. She had finished it. And then Dr. Harkin had sent someone to find her, and that someone had brought a box and a letter, and now here she was, moving through the rain on a Tuesday night with 8 years of small accumulated things under her arm, a framed photograph, 2 textbooks with broken spines, a reference binder, a mug she had never gotten around to replacing after the handle chipped, and the mathematics of what came next beginning to assemble themselves in the back of her mind whether she wanted them to or not. The Koreatown Strip at 11 on a weeknight was quiet in the way it got after the dinner rush, not empty, never fully empty here, where the restaurant signs burned amber and gold through rain-blurred glass, and the karaoke bars on the upper floors kept their sound indoors and their neon out. A few couples moved under shared umbrellas. A delivery rider cut past on an electric bike without slowing. Nobody paid any attention to a woman in light blue scrubs carrying a box. She was invisible in the particular way that people who belonged somewhere always were, and Jade had always belonged to the after-midnight version of the city more than she had belonged to anything else. 11 blocks to her apartment. She had made the walk in every kind of weather, in every kind of mood. Tonight she needed the motion more than she needed shelter. She was calculating rent renewal in 6 weeks, 3 months of savings if she was disciplined, which references she could ask for in the morning, when the first black SUV came around the corner at the far end of the block. It did not rush. That was the first thing she registered. Not the size of the vehicle or the dark tint of the glass, but the total absence of urgency in how it moved. It came around the corner the way water found a low point, certain, unhurried, as though it had already worked out where it was going. The second vehicle appeared from the cross street to her left before the first had fully settled. The third materialized from somewhere behind her. She heard the fourth and fifth before she fully saw them. Low engines, the soft press of wide tires through standing water, and by the time all 5 had arranged themselves around her, she had already stopped walking and completed her first full read of the situation. The vehicles formed a loose perimeter, with her at the center, not pressing her against a wall or pinning her to a curb, surrounding her on every available side with the kind of measured spacing that said this had been planned and executed more than once before tonight. The headlights held her in overlapping light. The rain fell through it in thin diagonal lines. The engines idled low, and even a sound like something breathing and patient about it. For a long moment, nothing else happened. That pause was its own communication. People who needed to frighten you acted immediately. People who already had the situation took whatever time they needed. The rear door of the center vehicle opened, and Park Miho stepped out. She would learn his name minutes later. Right now she cataloged him the way she cataloged every variable that could affect her outcomes. Broad build, contained movement, black jacket, dark trousers, a face that had made its peace with the specific function it was being asked to perform. He looked at the box she was carrying. He looked at her scrubs. He looked at her face with the focused attention of someone who had been given a description and was confirming it matched. "Are you the nurse?" he said. His English was precise. His accent was Korean. Jade looked at the 5 vehicles sitting in the rain around her, and then at him. "Depends on who's asking. Meridian General. 3rd floor nursing station." He said it flat, like coordinates. "Were you working there 3 weeks ago, Thursday night?" "I worked there most nights," she said. "Worked." Past tense, as of about an hour ago. She shifted the box on her hip. "What is this about?" "My name is Park Miho. My employer has questions about something that occurred at your hospital. That is the complete extent of what is being asked tonight. You have my word you will be returned to this exact street when the conversation is finished." "Whose word is backing that?" Jade asked. "Mr. Seo's." She looked at the perimeter of vehicles. She considered the 11 blocks still ahead of her, the rain that was fully committed now, the box whose bottom corner was beginning to soften. She was not naive about what these vehicles represented. She was also not naive about what the available alternatives were. Running was not a serious calculation. Screaming was theater for an empty street. She ran every option she had, quickly and without sentimentality, and she landed where she usually landed when the options narrowed. On the one that led somewhere. She got in. The interior of the SUV was warm in a way that belonged to a different category entirely. Not aggressive heat. The sustained, engineered warmth of a vehicle designed for someone whose comfort was a logistical priority. The leather was dark and stitched precisely. The air held cedar immediately, and underneath it something cooler, like outdoor air carried in on expensive fabric. Seo Yunj was already seated on the far side. He was reading something on his phone when she got in, doing it with his full, undivided attention, not the half-attention of someone passing time, but the focused stillness of someone for whom reading meant reading. His suit was charcoal and tailored close to the shoulder. His shirt was white, collar open, one button, no tie. His hair was black and cut precisely at the sides. His hands rested loosely on one knee in a stillness that was deliberate, not the stillness of someone with nothing to do, but of someone who had decided that what he was doing required nothing more from his body. He turned his phone face down and looked at her. His eyes were dark, nearly black in the low light, and they moved over her with the economy of someone collecting information rather than making an evaluation. She understood that mode. She used it herself at the start of every shift. She was doing the same thing to him, and she was fairly certain he knew it. "You are terminated tonight," he said. Not a question. A fact placed between them, so both parties knew where they were starting. "Word travels," Jade said. "We had someone at the hospital earlier. For an unrelated matter. They mentioned it." He did not elaborate. It changed the logistics of this conversation. Changed them how? "You have no employment at Meridian to protect. That removes one reason to tell me something other than the truth." Jade held his gaze. "Or, I have less to lose, which runs the other direction." He looked at her, a beat longer than the others had been, with the quality of someone accounting for a variable they hadn't fully projected. "Seo Yunj," he said. "Jade Monroe," she said. "Though you had that already." "Yes," he said simply, and looked out at the rain-streaked city moving past, and said nothing else, and the silence in the vehicle was not uncomfortable so much as it was specific. The silence of two people who were both thinking and had decided that was acceptable. The building they brought her to was in Gangnam. She placed it from the Han River lights visible through the upper floor glass, the bridge lines smeared by rain. The elevator required a keycard and opened onto a floor with no number displayed, just the soft deceleration and then the doors parting onto a space that was both less dramatic and more serious than she had anticipated. A long table. Men in dark clothing who rose when Yunjae entered and sat again when he crossed to the far windows without acknowledging them. The furniture was spare and precise. The lighting was task-focused over the table and low everywhere else. Nothing was decorative. Everything was present because it had a function. Miho placed her box beside the elevator. She hadn't asked him to. The man at the table who spoke first was younger than Yunjae, sharper in the face, economical in expression, with the manner of someone who had processed difficult information long enough that impatience had become precision. He pushed a tablet across the table before Yunj introduced him. Lee Dae-hoon, Yunj said from the windows. He handles communications and security. Dae-hoon did not offer his hand. The tablet shows outgoing call records from Meridian General's third-floor nursing station. 3 weeks ago, Thursday, 11:42 at night. The call went to a number registered to an opposing organization. Duration was 4 minutes. During those 4 minutes, the private admission records of a patient, admitted under a protected name, were read aloud to whoever was on the other end. Jade looked at the tablet. Several fields were blacked out. The timestamp was clear. The station extension number was visible. "You believe a nurse made that call," she said. "We know a nurse did," Dae-hoon said. "The nursing staff assigned to that floor that shift numbered 4. We have confirmed the location of 3 of them at 11:42. You are the 4th name." The rain was audible against the glass. The room was otherwise quiet enough that she could hear it. She set the tablet back down. Carefully. The way she set things down when she needed her hands and her attention fully clear. "I didn't make that call," she said. "You were on the floor." "I was on the floor for 12 hours, she said, and her voice was even. "So was every other person on your list before and after 11:42. Being present on the floor and being at the station at a specific minute are completely different things. You know that, or this conversation would already be over." Silence. Dae-hoon looked at Yunj. Yunj had turned from the window at some point she hadn't registered and was looking at her. "She's right," he said. Quiet, final. The tone of someone removing an unproductive direction from the table. "I can tell you who was at that station at 11:42, Jade said. "Because I know exactly where I was. The patient in room 314 coded at 11:30. I called it. I was in that room from 11:30 until close to midnight. When the code resolved and I came back to the station, the charge nurse was just getting off the phone." The silence that followed had a different density. "The charge nurse," Dae-hoon said. "Yoon," Jade said. "She wasn't on your list because charge nurses on that floor aren't assigned to individual rooms. They run the floor, which puts them at the station more than anyone, with access to every record that comes through. She would have been there at 11:42. She let a beat pass. She gave her notice 8 days ago. 2 days, no explanation, no forwarding contact. Said it was personal." Dae-hoon had his phone out before she finished the sentence, already moving toward the corridor, talking low and rapid. The room reorganized itself around the information. Jade stood at the table and did not move. Seo Yunj crossed the room to her. He arrived, that was the accurate word, because walked did not carry the right weight, with the full, quiet certainty of someone whose presence in a space was always complete. He stopped a few feet in front of her, close enough that the cedar of his suit reached her clearly, that she could see the exact darkness of his eyes, and the scar at the outer corner of his jaw, an inch, faded to near pale, old enough that no one probably looked at it directly very often. "Why did you stay?" he said. Not quite a question. "Because naming the source doesn't close the problem," Jade said. "If Yoon made that call 3 weeks ago, whoever she made it to has had 3 weeks with what she gave them. The breach isn't resolved. It's located. That's a different thing." She held his gaze without needing to work at it, which was its own surprise. "I spent 8 years learning to stay in a room when something was still unfinished." He looked at her for a moment that ran a fraction past what was strictly neutral. Then Dae-hoon's voice came from the corridor. 3 words in Korean, level and fast, and the room responded. Not with chaos. With the smooth, coordinated precision of people who had rehearsed this transition until it no longer required thought. For men moved toward exits. Miho crossed to the elevator with a deliberateness that told her exactly what kind of position he was taking. The overhead lights dropped. The windows went dark as the interior light fell below what was outside. Yunj turned. "How many?" "2 vehicles. East side." Dae-hoon in the corridor entrance, controlled. Stationary 17 minutes. They followed the convoy from Koreatown. Jade assembled the sequence, without being helped. Someone had watched Miho's vehicles pick her up, followed the convoy here, and was now sitting outside deciding what they knew and what they were going to do about it. "They saw me get in your cars," she said. "Yes." So, now I'm a question they need answered. Yes. His gaze settled on her with the directness of someone accounting for something that mattered. I need you away from the windows. She was already moving, not because he said it, but because it was the correct decision and she had made it at the same moment he had. She crossed to the interior wall and put her back against it.
Solid.
Structural. Yunj crossed the room and stopped in front of her, placing himself between her and the windows. Back to the glass, attention entirely on her. Not crowding, stationed, with the quiet finality of a decision that was not going to be renegotiated. This close she could see where the earlier rain had dried in the fabric at his collar, a faint shadow of it at the edge. The scar caught the low ambient light. The cedar and cold of him was immediate and specific in a way she noticed, and then noted that she was noticing. You're calm, he said. I'm terrified, Jade said. Those aren't the same thing. Something moved through his expression, brief, involuntary, there, and collected before it could reach anything it wasn't authorized to reach. She filed it quietly, without announcing she was doing it. The private patient, she said, keeping her voice at his register. The one whose records were accessed. It's not only organizational for you. He looked at her with the particular quality of someone who had not expected to be read accurately and was deciding how to respond. My brother, he said. He stripped the sentence to its minimum before delivering it. He was admitted under a protected name for a condition he kept private from everyone in this organization except me. What Yun gave them is not simply data. It is leverage over someone I will not permit to be leveraged. Jade did not say she was sorry. She had learned, across years and difficult rooms, that sorry was not always what people needed when they told you the truth. Sometimes the right thing was to receive it without immediately filling the space. And the people outside, she said. They're the ones using it. Attempting to, he said. There is a meaningful difference. That was when Dae-hoon came back through the corridor at a different pace than he had left. Not running. Something more controlled than running, and more urgent than walking. He said something to Yunj in Korean, 5 words, and whatever they were, the temperature of the room changed around them. Yunji's jaw set. When? 12 minutes ago. They've been running her plates. Dae-hoon looked at Jade. Not unkindly, but without softening. They know who she is. Her home address. Her phone number. He paused. They sent a message. They want her. The silence, after that, had a specific weight. Jade absorbed it the way she absorbed hard information in a clinical setting, completely, without flinching away from the actual shape of it. Someone outside this building, in the rain, in a vehicle she had not chosen to interact with tonight, had decided she was leverage. Had decided that the woman who had walked out of a hospital an hour ago with a cardboard box was now a piece of something larger than herself, without her consent, without her knowledge, and without any interest in whether she agreed. They want me to get to you, she said. Yes, Yunj said. And if I walk out of here? You will not walk out of here alone, he said. The way he said it was not a threat, and was not a comfort. It was a statement of fact from a man who had apparently already decided what the facts were. I'm not asking you to protect me, Jade said. I know, he said. I'm not asking your permission. She looked at him. He looked back. The scar at his jaw, the dark suit, the rain that had followed him in from the street and dried in his collar, and his eyes on her face with an attention that had stopped being about information somewhere in the last 10 minutes and had become something she did not yet have a clean word for. What do they want in exchange? She asked. Access to my brother's location, Yunj said. And to me? Through you. So I'm bait. You are not bait, he said, and the quiet finality of it closed the door on the word entirely. You're someone who is in danger, because you were standing on a street at the wrong moment. And I am going to correct that. Jade looked at the room, at Miho by the elevator, at Dae-hoon waiting, at the 4 other men positioned at exits and doorways, and then back at Yunj. What does correcting it look like? She asked. We draw them in on our terms, he said. Not theirs. He turned to Dae-hoon and began speaking in fast, low Korean, and the room reorganized itself again, more completely this time, more finally, every person in it moving with the economy of people who knew exactly what they were doing and had no opinions about it. Jade stood where she was and thought. She thought about the box by the elevator, about the termination letter in her pocket, soft from rain, about the 11 blocks home she had been planning to walk an hour ago, and the job she no longer had, and the person she had been before a Tuesday night decided to become something entirely different from what she had expected. And she thought about Seo Yunj saying "my brother" with the stripped-down precision of a man who had long since run out of people he trusted enough to say it to, and who had said it to her anyway, in the low light of a penthouse with rain on all its windows, in a voice that did not ask for anything back. She crossed the room to where he was standing with Dae-hoon. Both of them looked at her. "I know that building," she said. "The Rivals. What organization are they?" Dae-hoon said a name she didn't recognize, then added, "North Side Operation. They've been looking for an opening against us for 8 months. And they think I'm the opening. They think you're leverage, yes. Then let them," Jade said. "But on a timeline you control." She looked at Yunj. "If they believe I'm leaving this building alone, they'll move to intercept. You'll know exactly where they are, and exactly when they'll be exposed. Give me an earpiece and a route. I'll walk it." The room went very quiet. Miho, from near the elevator, said something in Korean that had the rhythm of an objection. Dae-hoon's expression did not change, which Jade was already learning meant something. Yunj was looking at her with a quality of attention that was different from every other quality she had seen from him tonight. More direct, more still, like something that had been held in careful check had reached a point where checking it required more effort than it was worth. "No," he said. "It's a clean solution," Jade said. "They move on me, your people close in from 3 sides." "No," he said again. The same word, the same tone, but with something underneath it now that had not been there the first time. "You are not walking out of this building as a target. I walked into 5 of your vehicles on a public street an hour ago," she said. "I think my baseline for acceptable risk is higher than you're giving me credit for." He stepped closer to her. Not aggressive, measured, deliberate, the way he did everything. Close enough now that the cedar of his suit was immediate, that she could see the particular darkness of his eyes and the controlled way his jaw was set, and the way he was looking at her like she was the most complicated thing that had happened to him in a long time, and he had not yet decided whether that was a problem. "Your baseline for acceptable risk," he said, low and precise, "is not the governing factor in this decision." "Then what is?" He held her gaze for 2 full seconds before he answered. "You are." The silence that came after that had a different texture from every silence that had come before it. Not the silence of a room full of people waiting. The silence of one very specific thing being named without being explained, and landing exactly where it was aimed. Jade felt it land. She did not pretend otherwise, even to herself. "Then tell me what the plan is," she said, "because standing here is not it." The plan was Dae-hoon's, and it was precise. The rival vehicles outside had been watching the building's main entrance and the parking structure on the east side. They had not accounted for the service exit on the building's north face, which fed into an alley that connected to a side street 1 block over, outside their sight line, confirmed by Dae-hoon's men who had already moved to verify. The convoy would exit from the parking structure as a decoy, drawing attention. Yunj and Jade would go through the service exit with Miho. 2 additional vehicles waiting on the side street. Clean exit, controlled route, the rival team looking at the wrong door, while the relevant people were already gone. "And if they have someone on the north side we haven't accounted for," Jade said. "Miho accounts for that," Dae-hoon said. She looked at Miho. Miho looked back at her with the expression of someone who had been accounting for things for a long time and had not yet failed to account for one that mattered. "All right," she said. They moved 12 minutes later, and the 12 minutes between the plan and the execution Jade spent standing near the elevator with her box, watching the room operate around her. The precision of it was something to observe. No raised voices, no visible stress, no wasted motion, just people who knew their functions in a specific kind of situation performing those functions with the ease of long practice. She had worked in emergency medicine long enough to recognize operational efficiency when she saw it. This was operational efficiency. Different application, same principle. Yunj came to stand beside her during those 12 minutes. Not to say anything. Just to stand there in the low light, close enough that she was aware of him with the entirety of her attention, even when she was looking somewhere else. He did not speak. She did not ask him to. The silence between them had stopped needing to be filled somewhere around the third hour of the evening, and neither of them was going to pretend otherwise now. "Your brother," she said quietly. Not a question. Just placing the word between them. "He doesn't know any of this happened tonight," Yunj said. "Will you tell him?" A pause. "I will tell him the situation has been managed." "That's not what I asked." He looked at her.
"No," he said.
"It's not." Another pause, longer, with the quality of something being turned over and examined. "He worries about the cost of being connected to me. I prefer he worry about less." "He knows the cost," Jade said. "People always know. They just let you protect them anyway because it matters to you to do it." Yunj was quiet for a moment that stretched. "You are," he said slowly, "extremely perceptive for someone I have known for less than 3 hours." "I've been watching people in difficult situations for 8 years, Jade said. "You learn to read what's underneath what's being said. And what is underneath what I am saying?" She looked at him directly. "That you carry things alone, because you've decided that's how it has to be. And that you've been doing it for long enough that it has started to feel like just the way things are." He looked at her in a way that had no performance in it whatsoever, no management of expression, no calibration, no careful presentation of whatever he wanted her to see. Just a man, in a room, being looked at accurately, and not walking away from it. "Miho," he said, without looking away from her. "We move." The service exit opened into a narrow corridor that smelled like concrete and recycled air and something metallic underneath, and Miho took them through it at a pace that was fast without being a run. Jade had the box. She had refused to leave it when Daehoon suggested it, and neither Yunj nor Miho had pushed, and she carried it against her hip the same way she had carried it through the rain an hour ago, which felt like a different life. Yunj was beside her. Not behind, not ahead, beside, close enough that their arms nearly touched in the narrow corridor, and when the passage narrowed further around a utility junction his hand came to the small of her back for 3 seconds, guiding her through, and then was gone. Those 3 seconds were not nothing. She registered them as not nothing and moved through the corridor without addressing it. The north exit opened onto the alley. Cold air. The rain had eased to a fine mist that was more suggestion than precipitation. Miho went through first, cleared the sight line in both directions with the swift efficiency of someone who did this as a matter of course, and then held the door. They were halfway down the alley when the sound came from the far end. Not loud. The particular sound of a vehicle that had been idling quietly deciding to do something else. Headlights swept across the alley's mouth from the street beyond, and Jade processed in sequence. Not their vehicles, wrong position, wrong timing, not part of the plan. Miho said one word in Korean. Yunji's hand was at her arm, not grabbing, not pulling, but present, a clear directional pressure, and they were moving back toward the building's exterior wall, pressing into the shadow of a utility alcove that ran along the structure's side. Deep enough. Miho was already on his radio, low and fast, relaying the position. Jade pressed her back against the cold concrete wall. Yunj was beside her, his shoulder against hers, his attention on the mouth of the alley where the headlights were now stationary. In the close dark of the alcove, with the mist of rain on every surface and the specific silence of a situation that was waiting to determine what it was going to do, the cedar of his suit was very immediate. The warmth of his shoulder against hers was immediate. The controlled steadiness of his breathing was something she tracked without deciding to track it, the way she tracked vital signs without deciding to, automatically, because her body had learned that some information was essential. "Miho's people?" she asked, barely audible. "No," he said, just as quiet. "One vehicle?" "So far." She looked at the mouth of the alley. The headlights had not moved. Whoever was there was watching the exit, waiting to confirm what they had or had not seen. "They don't know we're here," she said. "Not yet. Then we wait them out." "Yes." "How long does your patience run?" she asked. The pause before he answered was very brief. "Longer than most people are comfortable with." She almost said something. She decided not to. The alley was dark and wet and cold, and there were people at its mouth who had decided she was a tool tonight, and she was standing in a utility alcove with a man who had decided she was not, and that was a distinction she was capable of appreciating without having to narrate it. Miho's radio produced a short burst of sound. He responded. Then he looked at Yunj and said 3 words. The vehicle at the alley's mouth reversed slowly out of its position and was gone.
Clean. No confrontación.
Daehoon's decoy convoy had pulled them away. They moved again. The waiting vehicles were on the side street exactly where Daehoon had said they would be. Jade got into the second one with Yunj, Miho taking the front.
The door closed.
The vehicle moved. The city opened up around them, rain-slicked and amber-lit, and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened, the way cities always were. Jade set the box on the seat beside her. She looked at her hands, dry, steady, no tremor. She was fine. She was also aware that she was fine in the specific way a person was fine who had not yet reached the other side of an adrenaline curve and was going to feel this later, alone in a quiet apartment in a way she would deal with when she got there. Yunj was watching her. I'm fine, she said, before he could ask. I know, he said. You have been fine throughout. That is not a small thing. For someone who got dragged into this off a sidewalk.
For anyone, he said.
And then, after a pause that had the quality of something being decided, I owe you more than a car ride home, Jade. She looked at him. He said her name like that, with the particular weight he had been putting behind it since the first time he used it, like it was a word he had decided to take seriously. You don't owe me anything, she said. I made my own choices tonight.
You did, he said.
And they cost you time and safety and the chance for a quieter evening than you deserved after the day you had.
He paused.
I am aware of what I owe. I prefer to be accurate about it. Is that an apology? It is a statement of account, he said. An apology would be for something I regret. I don't regret finding you tonight. He held her gaze with an evenness that was not coldness, was almost the opposite of coldness, which was what made it stop the breath briefly in the back of her throat. I regret only that it cost you something you didn't agree to pay. Jade looked at him for a moment. She thought about the falsified papers, about the box under her arm, about 8 years of staying in rooms when things were unfinished and never once having anyone take note of it, and then this man, in the back of a moving vehicle in the rain, accounting for it with the precision of a ledger entry made by someone who intended to balance the books. My lease renews in 6 weeks, she said. I need a job. He looked at her steadily. I know people at 3 hospital systems in the city, he said. People who do not ask inconvenient questions about termination paperwork and who would be fortunate to have a nurse who reads what she signs. I don't want charity. It is not charity, he said. It is a correction. There is a difference. She was quiet for a moment. And what do you want in exchange for the correction? She asked. The vehicle moved through a green light. The rain traced lines down the dark glass. Yunj looked at her with the specific directness he had been building toward all evening, the look of a man who had been managing his own expression all night and had arrived, finally, at the point where managing it was more effort than it was worth. I want, he said, carefully and with full knowledge of what he was saying, to see you again. The silence after that was not empty. That's not nothing, Jade said. No, he said. It is not. She held his gaze across the back seat of the moving vehicle, in the rain, with the cedar of his suit in the air between them and the scar at his jaw, and the city sliding past the windows behind him, and she thought about what she was agreeing to if she said yes, and what she was walking away from if she said no, and the weight of both. It's also not safe, she said. No, he said again. It is not. You're not going to tell me it will be. I am not in the habit, Seo Yunj said, of telling people things that are not true. She breathed out slowly through her nose. The people tonight, she said. That won't be the last time something like that happens.
No.
And your brother, there will be more people who want to use him. Yes. And you're going to keep carrying all of it. Yes, he said. And then, slower, unless. She looked at him. He looked back and did not finish the sentence and did not need to, because the unless was sitting between them with all the weight of everything the evening had been. The rain and the 5 SUVs and the cardboard box and the charge nurse and the alley and his shoulder against hers in the dark. And she had been a nurse for 8 years, and she had stayed in rooms when things were unfinished for 8 years, and she had read what was placed in front of her, and said no one knows what she meant, and she knew how to recognize a decision when she was standing inside one. "All right," she said. Yunj looked at her for a long moment. Something moved through his expression, not the brief involuntary thing she had clocked earlier, the thing he had collected and filed away. Something slower. Something that had been held carefully in check all night and had finally been given, quietly and without ceremony, permission. He reached across the seat and took her hand. Not urgently, not with the pressure of something emotional or dramatic. Just placed his hand over hers on the seat between them, with the same deliberateness he brought to everything, like he had chosen it, waited, and was prepared to stand behind the choice. She turned her hand over and let her fingers close around his. The vehicle carried them through the city, through the last of the rain. The Han River lights were visible for a moment through the window before the route turned north. The amber signs of Koreatown slid past and were gone. Jade Monroe, 28 years old, a nurse without a hospital, riding through the city in a vehicle that smelled like cedar, sat with her hand in the hand of Seo Yunj and looked out at the city she had always belonged to and thought that belonging somewhere had always, every time, cost something. She had always been willing to pay. When the car pulled up to her building, she expected him to stay inside. He got out. He walked her to the door of her building in the mist that had replaced the rain, without an umbrella, without any apparent concern about the weather. At the entrance, he stopped. She turned to look at him. The height of him, the precision of the suit, the scar at the corner of his jaw that she now knew was old enough to be part of him rather than something that had happened to him, the way old scars always were. "The box," she said. Miho was already bringing it from the car, and she took it and stood with 8 years under her arm and looked at Yunj. "I'll call Daehoon tomorrow," he said. "About the hospitals." "I'll answer," she said. He looked at her for a moment that held everything the night had been in it, compressed and quiet. "Jade," he said. That name. In that way. "Good night, Yunj," she said. She went inside. She took the elevator up. She let herself into her apartment, set the box on the kitchen table, and stood in the dark for a long moment looking at nothing in particular and feeling the particular texture of a life that had, in the space of one evening, rearranged itself entirely. She did not feel afraid. She felt awake, sharply, completely awake, in a way she had not felt in a long time, like something that had been running on automatic had been switched back to manual, and the difference was immediately felt in every function. She walked to the window, looked down at the street. The black vehicle was still there. She could see the shape of it at the curb, engine running, patient. It stayed until her light went on. Then it pulled away, smooth and unhurried, and the street was ordinary again. Amber light and rain-washed asphalt and the late-night city going about its business. And Jade Monroe stood at her window and watched it go and understood, with the clarity that only arrived after everything else had cleared away, that ordinary was something she had already left behind. She found she did not miss it the way she had expected to.